Professor Couric for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses. Appreciate the insight. I would ask, and I'll start with Mr. Burton and then go to Professor Kempa. You talked about that tension that needs to exist because somebody holding views is not necessarily the problem, but it's when it's a foreign state that is and there's influence in that process. So I'm just wondering, how do we square that circle, so to speak, to make sure that we can, in fact, have a framework that ensures that we are protecting our democratic infrastructure, research infrastructure, et cetera, while also protecting the freedoms and rights of Canadians, because there's a tension there. We have to make sure that we get it right. So I'd ask for your feedback, and if you have any specific suggestions about what that should look like in terms of the context of this bill, especially because there's such a tight deadline for amendments. Start with Mr. Burton.
Well, I mean, I certainly think that it's important that citizens of Canada should be serving the purposes of Canada and shouldn't have some remnant loyalties to a nation that their ancestors or themselves may have come from. And I do think that it's incumbent on us to have much more transparency in these matters. I mean, the Winnipeg Lab matter, I suppose that the issue was that Professor Chiu was receiving benefits from China through these 1,000 Talents programs and other arrangements with the Wuhan Institute for Virology that she was not open about. And I think that, in terms of for example, the issue with Kenny Chiu, the main problem was that we couldn't find out where the WeChat and other Chinese websites information was coming from. Was it, domestic political preference, or was it something coming out of Beijing? We couldn't get any transparency on the sources. All of the stuff was under pen names and on websites that we couldn't associate with any existing institution, which, of course, by itself is suspicious. So I do think that we just have to know. And of course, we haven't talked about this, but I mean, the point of this legislation is not to prevent people from taking benefits from a foreign state, but being transparent about it. And, that would be a choice of Canadians. I receive funding from different foreign governments that have engaged my consulting services. I am only too happy, if called upon, to make that publicly known.
I appreciate that. Mr. Kempa, quickly.
A quick addition would be for the constant emphasis of the term clandestine in the legislation. So it's not the issue of influence at all. Canadian citizen is democratically permitted to overtly promote the interests of another state. It's the clandestine piece and the disclosure of any interest.
So there's a comparison made with the Ethics Act, and I know that I hear from constituents often that are frustrated. I also sit on the Ethics Committee, of which this issue has touched it. There's that transparency piece that is so essential to make sure Canadians know about it. So then, at least if Canadians know about it, then they can make decisions accordingly. So is there? What should that mechanism in terms of transparency be? Should there be, bulletins, or is it enough to be on a list? Is it enough to make sure that, there's this coordination between different levels of law enforcement? What's the right level of transparency? Does there need to be more, or is what's proposed in the legislation, does it go far enough? And I have one more quick question if we have time.
Well, I think the legislation is good. As I said before, I think it's really the regulations that are going to be the key here. There's still a lot of things that haven't been fully explained, including, as you say, those, how do you define those terms? And shouldn't we have terms that are very clear in these things? But my own feeling is, with regard to receiving benefits from abroad, that there shouldn't be any privacy allowed, that you have to be completely forthcoming about any conflicts of interest because of foreign money. And I think if people feel that violates their privacy, it's easy. Don't take any foreign money, then you won't have to talk about it.
That's great. Anything to add, Mr. Kempa?
No. Simply that annual reporting on the part of the Registrar's Office, which would be picked up on media and whatnot, would be very helpful.
Well, I appreciate that.
Christopher